I'm so happy to do this panel, even happier than I thought I was going to be. And what I was sharing just recently is that people have asked me to do a panel on the types, or multiple panels, all 9 types, and the instincts and Tritype. And I thought, with regards to the Enneagram types, there were so many on Facebook or on YouTube that I didn't feel they were really needed. But then a couple people brought to my attention that there's so many people mistyped that it makes it hard to identify what panel you belong on, or if they had a friend or a family member that they wanted to help them understand the way a type thinks, and they take them to their known video on YouTube, and then it would be very confusing because with 5 people, 3 of them could be mistyped. And some types mistype more than others. So I was going to do those, and then I thought what's really important is to disseminate the correct information about the Enneagram types according to Naranjo and Ichazo, and then what my research confirmed. I also have 3 certifications with Helen Palmer, David Daniels, Don Riso, Russ Hudson, and Kathleen Hurley, and Ted Donson. I did those in 1995, 96, and had the great fortune to be able to attend Naranjo's first full training, not a study group, but full training on the Enneagram in Boulder in 1996. That filled in so many pieces and immediately made it so I was teaching a little differently from others, because there were things that were errors. And I chose not to continue on with the errors, like integration, disintegration. And recently I found a book where Naranjo said that it was just an idea, and then he was just misquoted thereafter. And that he never taught it formally, and he never intended it to go out more than just the few people that were in his study group. And that his study groups only covered 1.5 years. So it wasn't like years and years and years. So when I met him in 1996, he said that he hadn't taught the passions and fixations in their entirety. And he for sure had not taught the instincts in their entirety. And I know that's true because when I finished his course, Jack Labanuskas had asked me to write a kind of an article on what it was like to be in Naranjo's training and what I had learned that I didn't learn in 3 certifications. And it was very, very apparent. There's a whole article, and it's titled, I think I've got it titled, Claudio Naranjo, Reflections on Type. So Ennea isn't even in there. But it's on my website and with my blogs and my articles. And now you can even search. If you go to my homepage, there's in the lower right are blogs, and all you have to do is just put in the name of one, Claudio Naranjo, and you'll find it. But the reason it's meaningful is I was able to just say, wait, we didn't talk about this or this or this. There wasn't a training where this came up. And it would be good for people to know. And what we're going to see here is a lot of what I learned from Naranjo, or the nuances. And that is not out there in any depth. He has, or did, I should say. He did do some panels over the years, but when he videotaped them, they just took key things out of the panel. They didn't show a full panel. So that's why I thought I really needed to do it. And when I attended the intensive with Ichazo, it confirmed much of what Naranjo had taught, but there were variations. Why were there variations? Because Naranjo was not going to use Ichazo's copyright or trademarks. So he called it the Enneagram rather than proto-analysis. So if we call it the Enneagram, one way or another, we're all coming through the line of Claudio Naranjo. And they're just key terms. And that's why I ended up with Tritype, because the Eurekaans suggested that he would like to keep that name and he wanted to trademark it if I was willing to let go of the name. I go, it wasn't my name. I had it 3 types and Tri-Center. So that's fine. I just need to think of a name. And they said, oh no, we wondered if you wouldn't want to just do Tritype because you do the whole type. So let's begin. What is it about type 2 that has been so lost in the transmission of the Enneagram? It's more than I can even begin to share with you today. But let's begin first by having the panelists introduce themselves. Cindy?
Hi, my name is Cindy, and I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I am a 279, and I am social first, sexual second, and self-pres, of course, last. And I'm happy to be here and hopefully learn some new things and help others learn as well today.
And how long have you been aware of and studying the Enneagram?
I have been studying the Enneagram, I think, for a little over 12 years. I was certified under Jerry Wagner and Helen Palmer and you, Katherine, and served on the Enneagram board in Las Vegas for a few years and then moved away, and now I'm back. So I find it helps me learn a lot about myself.
Great. That's what I think we all believe. Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Nakians. I live in the Philadelphia area, and I am the sexual self-pres 278, and I've been studying the Enneagram for around 7 or 8 years now. Is that everything?
Yeah. Yes. And with a variety of people or books?
So I've certainly read a variety of books, and primarily in terms of courses and training, I've studied with you, Katherine, because what Katherine says about the Enneagram makes sense to me. So I find plenty there to keep me occupied and keep learning all the time.
Well, you're kind of getting a little bit of everyone, because wherever I went, that ended up in my training. If it was good, it was incorporated. And there's a lot of meaningful stuff from a lot of different teachers or approaches. Thank you, Rachel. Linda?
Hello, I'm Linda Candlish. I live in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, which is a rural area, central Pennsylvania. I encountered the Enneagram notes evidently in one workshop, 2-hour workshop. Someone was reading through these obscure notes, and then I moved like the next month or week and could not find it for a long time. Then I started reading late 90s, found the books, entered training in the Enneagram Institute in 2004. What caught me instantly at the first exposure was that I worked as a psychologist, that it showed the gifts as well as where we get stuck in our ego. And it was like instantly compelling. So I studied with Don, had that privilege, and Russ, and then was part of a 10-year we called it Essence Emerging, a group with Jessica Dibb and Russ Hudson. And then moved on to, and then on a joint experience, met Katherine, and a psychic had said, it's who you're going to meet on this trip that will count. So I really paid attention and have just been, since 2012, integrating all of Katherine's material as best as I can.
Excuse me, Linda, thank you so much. Yeah, you certified with me and you took all of Don and Rusty's courses, I believe.
Yeah, and a couple, one with Helen and David. So I'm really glad I got to experience David particularly. And then a lot of the Shift Network.
Oh,
also.
Yeah. That gave a very broad view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we met Linda in 2012. And even though Linda's certified, she does what a lot of certified people do, and that is carry on and repeat classes and learn new nuances that take on a new shape or form. And modifications are part of our personal growth, refinements. We're going to go to that in the next round. Let's finish with Jane.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jane, and I live in San Jose, California. I've been studying the Enneagram for about 5 years now, quite intensively. I've had several Enneagram coaches, and I've taken over 30 trainings, so it's been quite a ride. I met Katherine taking a year Enneagram monthly group I joined a couple months ago. And I've been working with Katherine one-on-one, which has been such a treat. I found that her one-on-one sessions have been really rich because she can understand things that I haven't found a lot of people can understand about me. So I'm very thankful about that. I'm happy to be here.
Great, Jane. And Moshe.
Hi, I'm Moshe Goodman. I am dominant sexual, secondary social, 2-9, and my head center is kind of undetermined right now. Probably at 7, probably a 2-9-7, but there is a lingering possibility that I could be 6 in the head center. And I came to the Enneagram 22 years ago when I was a senior in high school, and just had a breakup and went to a Jewish bookstore for unrelated reasons and found this book by a teacher named Miriam Adahan, and it was wonderful and it explained everything and I was never going to make a mistake again. And over the years, I did a lot of reading. I read the Riso and Hudson stuff, Helen Palmer, like I said, Miriam Adahan. In the past year or so, I've become extremely interested in the work of A.H. Almas and Sandra Maitre and Katherine. And Katherine is the only direct teacher I've actually ever had in the Enneagram. I was reading and interested and just almost not even realizing that there was such a vast community out there of students and teachers and just so much. And so I just started studying with Katherine quite recently, and lots of just doors being opened and new understandings. And it's really cool after already having been digesting this stuff for 20 years to realize, like, holy cow, there's so much more.
Yeah, whatever we think we know, it's great, but there's always more. That's why I've never been bored in 35 years, and 25 of those years doing ongoing studies or still working with material that I've gathered in the studies. I have a whole section of my last study that I have not formally taught, just because I asked 81 questions or 85 questions, something like that. And a lot of good material came out of that, and I have taught that. But the rest of it, it'll be here one day. That's why I haven't started a new one. But we're going to look at variations within type and the typing journey too. So I think it's really helpful. And I love patterns. So I think it's helpful to see what types you were thinking about before you landed on 2. And did you ever mistype as another type for a period of time?
No, I never thought I was anything else. When I first heard about the Enneagram, Nancy Hunterton and Steve Purdom were teaching at a church. And when they started describing the 2 tiers, just flowed. It's like, oh my gosh, somebody else knows who I am. And I never, ever questioned that. I always knew that's who I was.
Yeah, there's a very emotional aspect to type 2. In fact, the whole heart center is taking their emotions as the tool for measuring what's going on with themselves, with others. But the 2 and the 4 will tear up quite easily. In fact, the 2 the most of the heart center. And in particular, the sad 2. Unfortunately, a lot of sad 2s are put into 4. And they're very different. Where the attention goes is different. And 4 isn't about sadness. It's creating an identity that's very different than the 2's identity. You can watch Korean television. It's extraordinary. Every single, it doesn't matter what they're talking about. There'll be a kind of a story where someone is abandoned or their child on their own. They've lost their parent. They don't know where their parent is. There's always a tragedy. And then the arc is finding someone to understand their tragedy and help them. And they have perfected how to have a teardrop perfectly go down the face, or go down the face, land in the T, or if it's 1, 2 looking up at another person, then their tear will drop and mix with the tears of the other one. It's just extraordinarily artful. And people say, but isn't that 4? No, it's too commonplace for 4. It can't be the theme in every TV series. It has to be unusual, more distinct, more intellectual. So it's a great way to see 2. And I believe it's social too as well. Okay, Rachel, what types did you look at when you determined you were the 2?
Yeah, really, really great question. So it was both suggested to me, not by an official teacher or anything, just by people who knew a little bit and wanted to tinker around. And also I found myself gravitated to the 4, I think in many ways for reasons that you just described. Certainly as a younger person, I would have identified as sort of a sad 2. And also, I'm an artistic person. I went to art school. I studied in fashion design. So aesthetics is a very important part of my life. Mm-hmm. And so for many people, the depth of the Enneagram ends at, well, if, you're occupied with aesthetics and you want to be unique, then therefore you are a 4. And so I certainly resonated and still do resonate with those things. Those are true things about me. And up until I found Katherine's work, I had never read a description of the 2 that seem to have anything to do with me, quite honestly. And that all being said, I never felt settled as, as a 4. And I looked into 7 a lot. That made a lot of sense to me. And also into 1, interestingly enough. I related very much to feeling extremely self-critical all the time. And so that was the attraction there. Although I could see that that was too rigid, and then 7 felt too playful, too fun almost for me. And the 4 was just like a little too dark or solipsistic or something relative to me. And so I think that's what kept me looking.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you're making. One reason you would not find yourself is the sexual 2. In the original work, the sexual 2, it was, for the male, it was conquest and assault, very strong, macho kind of attitude. And the female, it was seduction. And now, that was, of course, 50 years ago. And now men are more openly seductive and women are more comfortable being tough. But the self-pres 2, very different by comparison. So each instinct is vitally important. And when we understand that Naranjo created the instinctual subtypes, the 27 subtypes, he didn't create the instincts, that was Ichazo, but the 27 subtypes came from Naranjo. And what he did is he took those 3 instincts that Ichazo had, and then he made a variation for each type within the center. And then he divided the 2 into more primitive versions of Ichazo's original instincts. And he did that for all the types. And where people can miss the mark is they think that the instinct is different from the types. The only difference is the focus of attention and the core fear. So that's why you identified with 4, Rachel, because the sexual instinct is very 4-ish. In fact, much of what has been given to 4 really belongs to the sexual instinct. But when it's a role and it's coming from a higher emotional, not the highest, not the essential qualities, but average functioning, we're going to see that you're a 2. But within the divisions of 2, you are double heart because you are a sexual 2. So sexual is the heartful, self-pres is the visceral, like the gut, and social is like the head center. And I will probably do one talk on that, but it's also in the training that I'm doing right now on the center. So if you understand that, you can see how people innocently made mistakes trying to take what someone else said about the instincts and then trying to modify the words so they weren't violating copyright, and then inadvertently saying something that isn't true. You have to see the way they come together. Same with Tritype, by the way. I've seen a lot of things said about Tritype that aren't possible if you really understand the Tritype and the way they cancel out certain features and minimize others. So we're going to see a lot of variation just simply because all 5 of you are not the same Tritype or instinct. Thank you, Rachel. Linda?
Yes, indeed, this feels more like almost like a coming out party because I have identified for all this time. Initially, I looked at all the types and I could see connections to all of the types. And so as I was doing some years of reading books before going to workshops and trainings, I went through probably everything but 8. 7 would have been a very short visit, and 8 was never at that point. But yeah, I could see the 1. I'd weigh the 3 because I could feel ambition and striving. 6, some, but then I'd back away from the anxiety of it because I didn't want to admit that, I think. 2, I lived there on and off for, I think, quite a while. But I'd forgotten that. And as I started my trainings and was getting feedback from classmates and teachers and hearing panels, I seemed to really fit with the 9. And so last summer, in a group with Katherine, I think she'd been watching this for a while, but she raised the possibility of 2. And when all of a sudden a lot of eyes in this small group became alert, I thought, well, there might be something there. And I began really looking at that, the differences. And reading, what helped so much was reading Naranjo's writing about it. And then starting to track what words felt I had misinterpreted for the 2 or the 9.
And not you, but you would have heard that too. It wasn't just that you misinterpreted it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
yeah.
it was taught.
So there was a lot of overlap that I had to then understand with more specificity. And I don't know when in the panel I could name some of those because I think they were really helpful to tease apart for me. And I'm still teasing it apart, but I absolutely do see that more of my patterns, core patterns, fit with it too.
And Linda, you're a great example of someone that would struggle because the 269 is kind of a gentler, softer paced, slower paced 2. And to have the 9 in there would just make total sense if you identified with 9.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find working with people is I work with all 3 types in their tritype. But when one is just not one of the accurate types, those issues don't show up when there's a problem. So we don't
what do you mean if it's not the accurate type, the issue doesn't show up?
Let's say you identified with 8. In the sessions, there would never be 8 issues to work with if you don't have 8 in the tritype. It's one of those very clear things to see. Now, there are lookalikes, and one of the lookalikes is that 2 and 9 are very soft in their focus and their kindness towards others. But that's where it changes. 9s are strong by being a tree, like being solid. And they don't try to get you to do what they desperately need. They just go get what they want or go without it. Whereas the 2 is strong in their ability to be persuasive, to get people to understand their distress and try and make it so that the person wants to tend to your needs. Because one of the issues with 2 is that you're the type that is very attentive, sees the needs of others, and then because you're so far ahead of everyone else, you just meet that need. Like every time I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank, whether in San Francisco and in LA, what I found was that it would be the 2, especially the social 2, that would notice how much water was in the glasses. Now we had those pitchers of water between 2 people, so it wasn't like they had to get up to get water, but the 2 would notice in any class, and I taught every division of the Federal Reserve, whether it was checks and money or statistics or regulations, anything and everywhere. Team 5, and back in 2003, the infrastructure, and I found it was the same. There would often be a 2 in each group, and it would be the 2 that would notice those water glasses and then start pouring people's water. It's just a part of the 2 nature, the graciousness. I don't have gracious as one of the words for 2, but 2s are gracious. It's just 2s do not see themselves as, it's not that you don't see yourselves as gracious, it's you don't write it down. You don't fill out the Enneagram questionnaire and put the word gracious as one of your adjectives, because there are too many other adjectives that take precedence. So I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I'll just add on that one thing. Someone in my late 20s said, name 5 ways you want to be seen. And I had gracious on that. When you die or as you age, I had gracious on that list. Interesting. But I thought it was a developed quality.
Yes.
And it is. But.
No, and maybe the sentence made it different, the way it was positioned. Mm-hmm. Whereas the questionnaire that I use and where all the research came from is deliberately vague, so that what you really associate with and think or feel comes up. And then if you don't know how it's going to be used, you might try to change it to another word. But even if you change it to another word, it still fits the tritype or instinct pattern. So it's not even a bad thing. That happened to me when in my 3rd research, where I got so many great responses to the Enneagram questionnaire. I sent another questionnaire and asked for pictures, words, and phrases that people identified with. And here's another questionnaire. If you have friends or family members, please photocopy it and have them send it to me. Now, this was before the emails, so I used to send a self-addressed stamped envelope just so I'd get better turnout. But a large number, maybe as much as 35% of the people sent the questionnaire again themselves. And I thought, oh no, is this going to ruin what I've already got and sorted and understandings? And to my surprise, and in a way, what further educated me is that they were about the same in the feeling. It was still the same types that I could see. The issues of their first questionnaire matched the issues on the second questionnaire, even if it was on in a different place on the questionnaire, or a word so similar that it just expanded my knowing. And I taught a few classes just on people taking that test at 2 different times, because it was a few months apart, so maybe they thought I needed it again. I also sent them one on how they saw every other type, and there were huge things that came out of that. Like, most types saw the 4 as flamboyant, but the 4 absolutely, positively would never use the word flamboyant to describe themselves. So it's really meaningful. Thank you, Linda. But yeah, 2s are gracious. There's no question. Jane?
So I had a very similar experience with the rest of the people on the panel, where when I fell upon my type, I knew that was me. And there was a sense of relief that someone understood me in this world. And I don't think I ever questioned my type before then, but as I'm learning the Enneagram more and more, what I'm experiencing is I'm experiencing what the other types feel like inside my own body. So that's been very interesting. Which sometimes I ask the question, am I this type? But then very quickly, no, I'm still a 2, will always be a 2. So that has been my experience.
And you just knew 2 right away when you read it or heard it? Did you see it in the class or read about it?
I flew out to Russ Hudson's part 1 in Colorado, and they were going through the different types. So I was listening, and it just, tears, the woodworks, because of my background also in spirituality. I was always taught to love, put everyone before me, and, that's the way to live. So to hear as a type 2, that's what I'm not supposed to do, was a hallelujah moment, like beyond anything I've ever known. It's the first time I was exonerated from that position, right, of being a martyr, actually. So, yeah.
There's a way in which each type will sacrifice, but do they make an identity of it? No. Do 2s tend to do that for the people that they care about or they're attached to? Yes. Do they want to do it for just anyone? No. And what you're really talking about is the self-pres, and we'll get into that, because the self-pres 2 will do that nice thing, and it'll be generally a physical gesture, a chore, an errand, the thing that the person needs. But there is not this corresponding need to help every single person that you see. But having said that, is it hard to not stop what you're doing if you see someone that has fallen, or a real need, or is crying? Or is that easier to do over time?
Oh, are you asking me?
Yeah.
Question? Yeah. Yeah, I have to hold back. I think whenever I see a need, in the past, I didn't know that I could say no. I just would answer the need. Now it's gotten a lot better. It's moved on to what is the need, to, well, what is it that I want to do? So it's shifted quite a bit. So yeah, but I have to stop myself when I see a great need.
And that's what people are going to notice as we go through this, that we have 2 social, 2 sexual, and 1 self-pres. And you're just going to explain things a little differently. The 2 part will be the same, but the flavor is different. So the kind of the chicken soup 2 that we talk about, that you're sick and they make you, chicken broth that you need and deliver it, that's more the self-pres to. The social might do that, but they might be too busy, so they might stop and get it at a really good specialty market. And the same with the sexual, unless they have a passion for cooking. So that's very good. Moshe.
Hi. So I never gave any serious consideration to anything other than 2 as my primary type. That first book that I read when I was 17, I mean, had a nice little chart of like ideal traits and intermediate traits and unhealthy traits. And I was like, yep. I got all of them. I know this is it. This makes sense. And that was, that was the typical narrative of we just want to love and be loved. Right. And that narrative isn't all there is to 2s, but at that age it resonated perfectly. Like I'm good with the typical narrative. As I've evolved and life has hit me with certain things, and I've seen different sides of myself and different reactions and patterns and stuff. I now understand the passion of pride much more. I understand that it's really not really just all I want to do is love and be loved. I mean, like that's a lot of most types could say that. But the idea of pride versus humility being key, and of holy will, like the idea of surrender, and I think I understand that aspect of things more now intellectually than I did before. But the truth is, if I think about my spiritual life, even at that age, I would not have called it, I understand that pride is my issue as a 2, because I didn't know about the holy ideas then. I just knew the stereotype.
And you wouldn't. I mean, just being a 2, the issue is pride.
Yeah.
But the catch is that you wouldn't know it because pride is not thought of as a difficulty. If you're proud of people and what you're doing, that's called self-esteem.
Well, no, that's the thing. It was a huge difficulty for me. I was very aware of it. I thought it was my extremely strong 3-wing or something. Like I didn't think of it as being fundamental to my type, but it existed. And from my learning of Jewish spirituality and moral teachings, pride versus humility is huge. Like it's so central. And so every Yom Kippur, which is the day of the year where, us Jews are doing Enneagram work essentially, whether we know it or not, right? Like it was all about that. And I was aware of the need to break my pride, but that dynamic itself, later in life, I looked back on with a certain kind of resentment, because it's like, I don't know if I need to break it that hard. There was a toughness with myself that I think came with it. I'm supposed to be more humble because I have to be that great.
That would see. And the reason you might think of it as 3-ishness is that most people don't understand how ambitious and prideful the 2 is. It's not just emotion. Their effort goes into helping people do well, and that's why 2s can be the power behind the throne. But either way, it's someone who wants to create a bridge to others so that others will meet them, the 2, on that bridge. But 2s are just building it, multiple bridges everywhere. Another thing, I think we were saying really the same thing, because the 2 is more the social networker, in terms of people. And the 3 is the networker in terms of achievements and accomplishments. And for a 2, the accomplishment or achievement always involves people. It's not just an achievement towards a goal. It's an achievement of making a difference in someone's life. And one error that some people make where they think they're a type 1 is the goodness. 2s really believe they need to be the good, kind, humble person, and that random acts of kindness would be a way of life, not just random. It would be a little bit every day, naturally. Can you speak on that, Moshe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, Jane was talking about getting out of the compulsion, and I was having, like, for myself, kind of a negative response to that. Like, well, yeah, sure, I shouldn't feel compulsive, but like that doesn't mean I should stop doing it. Like, whoa. I remember, you know, like always reading, it was, you know, I think in Riso and Hudson's levels of development, it's like once you've transcended the compulsion, well, you're still going to be the way that you are, just without the need. And it's like, oh, okay, good. Then I can do this work as long as I'll still be the way that I am. But it's not necessarily the chicken soup person. I'm not going to be the chicken soup person. That's not interesting to me. But there's like a ratio of how much need the other person has and how interesting it is to me, right? And so, like, if there's a dire need for chicken soup and I'm the only one, yeah, fine, I'll figure out how to make the damn chicken soup if I have to, you know. That's certainly not going to be my first try as far as how to help people. But the idea that my ego has a hard time justifying the existence of myself without knowing that I'm doing some good for people, you know. And when I say some good, there are lots of versions of like good that's not good enough. Like, I'm saying some good, but
Exactly. So when we talk about 2s having a fear of being worthless, it means they're not a good enough person. Now, the 1 does not want to be wrong, bad, evil, or corruptible, but they're trying to be good. They're not focused on being a good person. It's different. They're focused on continual improvement, that a good person in one language is continuing to improve at all times. And so for them, it's mandatory. Whereas a good 2 is a kind, sensitive, caring person that is going to see a need in others and meet it. In fact, kind of the universally accepted little 2-sentence paragraph that I wrote for the 2s on the cheat sheets. Now, if any of you have taken my test at EnneagramTritypetest.com, you'll get the cheat sheet that goes with your type. But in my summary description, where I could take this and teach anybody anywhere and go into as much or little depth as I want, is to just begin with like the overview, then the worldview, the motivation, the unconscious need, the coping strategy or where the attention goes, and then the strengths and the weaknesses, and then the leadership style. I use it a lot in business. But 2s believe that they must give to and fulfill others in order to gain approval. Remember, the 2 is a heart type. There's a need for admiration. There's a need for approval. They become relationship oriented, sensitive to the feelings of others, and tend to focus on the needs, concerns, and goals of other people. Twos dislike solitude and impersonal dealings in particular, and they're attracted to service and making personal connection. Now, I could take that word connection and I could use it as one of the instinctual types, and of course it belongs to the sexual, which is a more primitive version of the heart center. Makes sense. But a lot of people want connection. But the twos, why are they building a bridge? Because they want connection. So if you could address anything in that, but I want to introduce the worldview, because in my opinion, with a type, your first kind of, for us to see you, to see the two, we begin to know that it's very important to you to be attentive to others to gain approval. If you didn't take anything else away, that would be the best takeaway, is that twos are trying to earn the right to be given to. And it's not conscious until they learn about the Enneagram and make it conscious. And the worldview is that people need me and they depend on me. And I must demonstrate goodness in a way that's to counterbalance that unconscious fear of worthlessness. So if you could each address that in any order, anything that you identified with.
I caught myself in an interesting moment of this just yesterday. I was telling a story from many years ago when I was a camp director. The year before the summer I was in charge, they had a zoo come to camp, like a zoo on a truck, and I thought it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, these animals are in tiny cages. I just thought it was so wrong. And then I was in charge the next summer. I was the camp director now, and so my first act was, there's no way we're doing this. And I was telling my fiance I was telling her the story, and as I was telling the story, I got so angry. Like, I was back there and I said something, and then I caught myself saying it, and I was like embarrassed. I said, yeah, and there were people who were all upset about it. Like, they were like, no, we actually liked that program last year, we want to keep it. And I was like, well, guess what? When you have a good person in charge, you don't have bad things happen. Sorry. I was like, and then I stopped. I was like, whoa, what? What was that? Like, it was so clear that like a just enormous ego defense was coming out, and it was a little scary.
And it's two has a natural lines of connection to both 4 and 8. You never stop being a 2. They're pinging like a pinball machine. It's the 2 is pinging back and forth between 4 and 8. But what is important to know is that the 4 doesn't move to 8. It's the 2 moving to their lines of connection. So you just really hit on both, because the 4 is really focused and has a passion for protesting against, like, animals being abused or mistreated. And the 2 is caring for all things great and small. And the 8 is going to voice something they feel is unjust. So in that moment, you were fully a 2. You didn't become an 8 or become a 4. You are what 2s are, strong. And if I can just have you talk more, each one of you, about how strong you are and how you're like nines in the kindness, but your assertion is very different. The 2 is in the asserting triad. And so assertion, but you needed to be a good person. What happened?
Well, with in that scenario, you mean?
Yeah, because it hit a major button for you.
Well, in the actual scenario, it was just done. The button that got hit was separate. It was actually just, yeah, that was separate. But
Well, you were triggered by anyone wanting to put animals in that situation.
it was anyone wanting to put animals in that situation, and it was also, I think there was a sense of, I haven't been in charge up until now, and that's why ridiculous shit like this was able to happen. Now I'm in charge. No. There's nothing to talk about here. We're not going to consider whether or not we're going to torture animals for the kids to have fun. No, it's over. But I'm aware, like, the adamance to not hurt an animal, I think, comes from the deepest parts, right? But this is ego strength. This isn't my real strength, right? Like, my real strength doesn't need to be asserted in that way. Like, I don't, it's.
But we all use our defenses. So,
right.
So the purpose of the panel is to look at what the ego defense does and why. Now, we're born with our type, but how resilient we are, how flexible we are, makes a huge difference. So if we have a particular wound that was repeated over and over again, we're not going to be as resilient towards that particular issue. We could get caught up and show our type, in this case, 2-ness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost just an assertion of myself. It's like.
And your values.
Yeah.
And you're not social, but 2 is one of the social types. So sociability is because of this desire for interconnectedness. 2s want to know everybody and have everybody like them so the 2 can feel safe. And then the 2 cherry picks the people that they want to be closer to. So in your case, you just demonstrated why 2s are such good managers, meaning they don't back away or avoid conflict. They may not like conflict, but they will assert if it's an important value.
I will avoid conflict probably if it's for myself. If I'm not protecting someone else or making sure someone else is taken care of, then just the horrible discomfort of conflict would probably come first.
But some types and tritypes will avoid conflict more. And you have the easy relating tritype, so you don't really like it, and you're an ENFP, so you really want things to be more positive and find the magic in what is difficult or boring. So that's a whole nother story. But looking at what you do with conflict is important because 2s manage conflict. That's why the word is managerial. And if a 9 sees the word managerial on a card, one of my cards for my testing instrument, no, I'm not that. But until I put that word managerial on, everybody wanted to be the 2 card. So sometimes I have to put on some difficult words that someone of that type will still accept. Like a 2 will still accept that word managerial, but other types won't. So it's a great way to keep that card for the 2s. But two is well, actually, in terms of nines and sixes, they can misidentify as all 9 types. So it's how do I keep the 9s and 6s, especially the social 6s, off the other cards and have them feel comfortable with the 6 card. That's a journey. But thank you, Moshe. I mean, you just said something so important, even though you were talking about goodness. You demonstrated the strength of 2. And a lot of people don't really understand how strong the 2 is in service of a value that they believe is extraordinarily important. So you can do these out of order. And you can speak to the worldview of people depending on your help, how you see that, or the relationship-oriented aspect, or the impersonal dealings and wanting personal connections where it can sound like sexual. And so it's going to be harder for you, Rachel, because you are also the sexual type. So you would not like impersonal things at all. That if you choose, now remember, the 2 is going to choose who they want. They might have a lot of people in their world, but the 2 is not going to have that many that they really have cherry-picked, is what one 2 said to me years ago. Do you relate to that? Being a sexual and a 2?
Yeah, I definitely, while I'm interacting with a person, if it's the, cashier in line, absolutely, I'm going to try and make that interaction smooth and pleasant. And I may, even without meaning to, try to make them have a laugh or something that will, sort of break up the drudgery of being at work. Yet the moment I walk away, that person is out of my mind entirely, as if it never happened. And the only people that really are in there all the time are those that I've chosen. And especially for me, as a sexual, I think that's even more so, where a lot of the descriptions of the 2, and even how you're saying it now, sound like those branches go a lot more wide, where I would say for me, it's more about depth with my people, where there's, I didn't for most of my life. I see now how I'm always giving, even if it's, just a smile to the cashier or something. I see how that's an impulse for me. But what I see even more is how there is nothing that I won't do, that I won't bend over backwards to make happen for my chosen people, even when it's, a monstrous effort on my part for very little payoff, really, on their end. It doesn't have to be something important. It can be something absolutely stupid, like I would put, like, my husband having some frivolous thing that he wants in front of me having something that I actually need and would use, just because I know make him happy in the moment. And I would do that unconsciously without even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you don't have to be sexual for that. But the fact that it's your husband, the social feels that same way. They just can't stop themselves from giving the gifts, the little or big gifts to people. And actually, I wonder if you want to say anything here, Cindy, because we talked about it so recently. But do you feel people depend on your help? And what does it mean to you to want to make someone happy? Because 2s really do want to make those in their sphere of influence happy.
That's very true. You know, so many of the things that everyone is saying, I'm sitting here like, yes, 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 that's me, that's me, that's me. I do tend to be what most people would say is over generous. I give and give and give and give. And on a subconscious level, I didn't, in the beginning, I didn't realize I was doing it to get back. And I do events for a living. So I'm dealing with a lot of people, and it is very important for me to have that connection, that bridge with them. I build it through emails before I ever meet them. And when I meet them in person, it's like we've been friends forever. I would also say it's important to me that things come off polished, that if I'm going to have a party, I think I shared this with you before, you know, I will have every drink that everybody likes. I will have every snack that I know they're going to like, and it will be here, and they will have a comfortable, amazing time because they'll have everything they need. And sometimes I'm pretty sure I know people's needs better than they know their own. So much so that, you know, I will go out and get things for them. They may mention something once, oh, I really like that, but I'll never forget. I am like a historian. I don't forget anything. And like, you know, I'll jonesing to get you a Hydro Flask bottle so that you'll have your cold drink, you know, when we're talking. But, you know, it's things like that.
Anything, right?
Pardon me?
Shouldn't say anything about a need. If people say a need around a 2, the minute the 2 sees that somewhere in the world,
mm-hmm.
they're going to want to snatch it and give it to, no, purchase it. It's just my terminologies.
Yeah.
Grab that. Say, yes, this person, Donnie really needs this, or Mark would love that, or Janice is having so much with her bread knife. Whatever it is, your people are everywhere. They're within you and without. So you see what they need everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I mean, I can remember being in San Antonio, Texas, in a bathroom with my daughter. We'd gone into a bathroom in the mall, and there was a woman, her daughter's ankle was bleeding because she was wearing new shoes, and her heel was rubbing, or I'm sorry, her heel, not her ankle. And I whipped out my purse and I whipped out a Band-Aid and handed it to her because, you know, why not? I have everything that everyone else might need too, you know? And my daughter was really embarrassed, and I'm like, but that mother is thrilled because her daughter's going to stop crying now, you know? So it is really for me about caring for others and seeing others happy. And in some way that makes me happy.
Oh, it does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for all of us, our Enneagram type, when we get to do what we're really good at, the world just calms and everything's in place.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same if we're forcing it or trying to make it happen. It doesn't feel the same way. But
Right.
we all know that moment when we feel that sense of harmony and equilibrium, when we're just doing what we were meant to do. We had to have every part of our personality doing what it was meant to do to derive the benefits from it. That if we're trying to do things that aren't who we are, it never goes off as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he said a number of different ways, and I use one of his quotes in Tritype because Tritype gives more of that information. Well, looking at how each Tritype modifies 2, so the fact that you're all 2s, but there are modifications. So if you're a sexual and you're 2, it's even more intense. If you are self-pres and you are 2, there's more of a focus on what the body needs and maybe the needs of other people's bodies, but it's going to be the physical world first. The social, the most socially kind of successful person and the most ambitious person is the social 2. Naranjo saw the social 2 is stronger than 8s. 8s, he just saw them as kind of a blunt force, you know, like boom. But the ability to sway opinions or work with emotional intelligence, all the domain of 2. So if a 2 is just average, they are very influential with the people that are in their groups. It's usually groups, plural. And always believe the more, the merrier. Mm-hmm. And that's social and 2 coming together. It's great. The fear of not belonging with the fear of being worthless. So the more the merrier, creating fun and value for others. Mm-hmm. Some sort of value proposition makes the 2 happy. So that's why 2s sincerely are happy when they get to do what they're really good at. And it breaks their hearts when I say, ooh, that you don't want to say that much. That's a little too emotional for that person. Like when people have me review a letter and it's going to someone that isn't just receptive to the 2. They always have to pull back the caring, considerate aspect of being a 2, because the tendency is to want to do it all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's where compliments come in. Thank you, Cindy. That's great. You just really...
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
This whole COVID thing has been really hard for me. I also have ocular incontinence as a 2. So if I cry, I'm sorry. But it's been really difficult to be a social 2, be stuck at home and you can't do anything for anybody. And it's forced me to spend more time with myself, which is good. And at the same time, it's been really hard because my tendency is to want to go out and help other people, or, you know, go take something to my 85-year-old friend, but she's afraid to answer the door. You know, there's just so many things that have limited me during this time. It's been difficult. I'm curious to know if anybody else has had a hard time. We've actually been COVIDing with some friends just to give us, you know, be able to play dominoes or something once a week, you know.
Socials have a very hard time with that. But let's ask Linda, because she's another social 2. And she also has 9 in the Tritype.
Yeah, I'm really listening. I feel like I'm learning from all the other 2s as you all talk about that extroverted, just active consideration. I have it, but it's more one-on-one. And usually I'll find myself either offering or giving something before I even thought. Mm-hmm. And it's not always out. It used to be really probably out of sync, not needed. But now I think I'm starting to develop that inner gyroscope for when is it appropriate, needed, when do I feel called to do it. But the way you, Cindy and Rachel and Moshe, thank you, sorry, talk about just wanting to be there. I don't have quite that same way. I've loved the isolation. But I am through Zoom having deep conversations with people every day in my work. So that balances. And we have a church community. And I really at some point, I committed to saying I'm in church and I'm going to church. and I love my church. But I was on the fence for years, but still going, and that's my community within this community. So I'm active with them, and occasionally we've done some little gatherings in a parking lot, but all socially distanced, or a meeting here and there. And actually, I am the one that organized all of them.
That's really good because if you're constantly with people, and if you like those people, like I really enjoy my clients, so nothing changed for me. I was seeing the same people I'd normally see on a rotation of about every 3 weeks to a month. But each type would deal differently with that. Now, I'm social last, but I like to have a good time. But if I'm already having a good time, I don't miss it. But I do miss it that my son feels, he shouldn't travel right now. And he was had to postpone his engagement party. And then I go, oh, I guess I do care about the social things. But everyone might answer that based on themselves. Or maybe back to you, Jane, as a self-pres. Do you like that extra time where you're not expected to do something?
Well, my life is more full now than it was pre-COVID, because I'm also a therapist and a life coach. So I see clients on Zoom. But I did go through a period, it wasn't because of COVID, but I went through a period where I was more isolated, and then I had to create a social network. And that's what I did. So online, like Enneagram groups or online classes, my initial reason to take part of it wasn't really to learn. It was really to get into community. It was more like a discipline to be around people. And it's been amazing. It's been that piece of, okay, Monday mornings, I got to get up at 7. I'm going to be with this group for 2 hours, and it's nice because that's where I go. It's just through Zoom. And also I think why I, in part, like Linda, loved some of the isolation part of it is because I took many years to love being by myself, like doing activities by myself and enjoying my own company, which was something I did not know how to do. So because of that.
The distinction though, choosing to be by ourselves, to pursue things that interest us, everyone wants to do. But how do we do if we're isolated and we don't want to be isolated? What does that feel like is another story. And 2s are one of the types that have a deep, deep fear of that type of isolation and are at all times building rapport with people so that they can have the certainty that they will have friendliness and rapport with people when they want it.
Well, I'm not sure if this is going to answer it, but I never considered my relationship to myself to be a very important thing.
That's self-pres, yes.
And as a 2, it was always about a relationship out there, but I had no idea how to have a relationship with myself. And because this is part of my work, this is what I teach people to do, I really have to practice it. So, I mean, whenever I feel like, oh my gosh, and I'll really ask myself, do I need to spend more time with, do I need to have a Zoom call? Do I need to do an activity? But sometimes it's just, I need to just be there and settle in my body and be with myself.
Yeah.
And I took on collaging because I didn't really know what was going on. So I started collaging, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, right? But I think it's just more of, for the 2, treating yourself as another person, like your own best friend, I think really helps. Then you kind of make time to do stuff, like fun things with yourself. It's kind of weird, but it works, at least for myself.
Well, and what I notice is, in a way, when you're sharing this part of it, you're doing it as though you were helping another person. You're not saying I. In this part, you were a moment ago.
Interesting.
But what you would encourage, it's like what you would encourage a two to do. You're basically saying about yourself. And the reason I highlight this is that it's another example of being other referenced, because twos know who they are by the way others mirror to them they have value. So you have to do the good deeds and be the good person, so that mirror reminds you of who you are. And without a mirror, that's why real isolation is extremely painful for twos. They don't have any mirroring. It's devastating. But if we have mirroring, and if a two has mirroring, we're happy. But a two needs more mirroring than they even realize, than you even realize. It's just not going to be noticed until there's an absence of it. And unconsciously, what the two does is some little act of kindness to remember who they are. They just know they feel kind of a sense of little tightness maybe in the heart, or a little uneasiness. It doesn't just stay in the third chakra. It goes up into the heart. And the minute the two looks around and sees something that they could do for someone else, and they do it, the self-esteem comes flooding back. But of course, the journey for the two is to realize that they can do that for themselves. And that's what you're talking about, learning to do something for yourself, and then not hoping, because it is the center of hope, that others will step in and tend to you the way you have tended to them. That's one of the saddest things for a two, is that other people just don't track the two as well as the two tracks them. That's why the two knows how to give the perfect gift. They've been paying attention. They're like people experts. Very extraordinary.
May I offer something right there? My first year teaching, I was living alone in a new city, first 2 years. And I didn't understand that. And so I would be on the phone with people, but I didn't make a community. It was a time of social unrest. I was working in an integrated school in special ed education, and that was new because it was the first resource room as opposed to self-contained. So there was sort of like now, in a way, social unrest, questioning, new models of ways to do things. And I was alone and not real skilled in the world yet, as much as I thought I was, that fake independence. And it was just so, it helps me understand your discussion, why it was such a hard year. And I did feel very isolated much of the time.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Linda, because the teachings from Ichazo are that the two has this identification with being independent, and they are independent in terms of going after what they want, and they want the freedom to do so. But what happens is that the defense strategy comes in and says, yeah, but you have to do this for this person now. Well, wait, that friend seems to be spending more time with that other friend, and I'm friends with both. I don't want to be left out. Oh, okay, I need to stop and spend time with both people independently so that I'm on equal footing. A lot of it is very unconscious until the Enneagram comes into the picture. And the false abundance, the two feels like they have plenty to give. I have extra here. Let me share with you. Oh, what? Oh, you need, oh yeah, let me get that for you. It's just a natural way of being, but at the same time, the two is wanting to go to a spa or have their creature comforts tended to get a massage, to be doing something for themselves. And they do, but it almost has to be a secret that they're doing it, or they overtly say, well, I'm taking care of myself now. But what it means is that the defense strategy is telling them that they need to be attentive to others to survive, to feel safe in the world. But there's an adventurous quality of two, of moving out and liking the variety and following their own kind of muse, so to speak, the independent part of two. And much of type 2 was put into type 7. 7 is more mental than the 2. Now, both of them like adventures and positive endeavors, but the 2 is going to bring the people together. Both of them can be really funny. They both can be the center of attention. But how? What's their humor like? It's a great way to see it. So we can go into that later, but thank you for reminding me of that, Linda, because the 2 promises a lot to people, and they promise more than they deliver. But on the other hand, they deliver far more than they promise. It's just, you don't know when you're going to get the over delivery and the under delivery, but delivery is going to happen. In fact, I've had several 2s say this to me in different ways, that one of the easiest ways to give is when someone says, oh, sorry I couldn't get together a couple weeks ago. I was moving. And the 2 would say, oh, why didn't you call me? I would have helped you move. But you see, it was already over. So by saying, I would have helped you move, is like you helped the person move. In the heart and check and balance of the 2, it's the same. So the difficult part of 2 is when the 2 is in pain and they start manufacturing needs for other people. They want to feel good about themselves, but they then start pouring water at a training when I'm trying to talk. There's no water right in front of me. So I have to stop till they've poured the water and then go back to teaching. But for whatever reason, in that moment is when the 2 is feeling, who am I? So 2, 3, and 4 are always asking themselves, who am I? I don't know. I need to carve an image for myself. And it'll be based on the high side of the defense strategy, which is, if the defense strategy says, be independent, go where you want to go, do what you want to do, and the other part says, no, you can't be alone. If you're isolated, you have no mirror, essentially. You have no one to share it with. You have no one to enjoy it with. Both 7 and 2 struggle with that. So if 2 and 7 are in the tritype together, it's extremely difficult to see which one is leading. But the way it is will be that the 2 gives an emotional attunement. So thank you, Linda. It's just speaking of the sense of abundance, but at the same time saying, please, please, pick me, pick me. It's not like me first, when Naranjo taught that for the self-pres too, he wasn't talking about the 2 saying, I don't wait in line, I don't queue for anybody. Now that can happen to a 2 if they don't ever do personal work. But what it really starts as is pick me, please, please, when the 2 is young and desperately needs to be important in their world of people. And there are many times when we're not chosen, and it's very sad. So if the 2 develops character, then they're lovely and they're doing for others the way they want things done for them. But if they're narcissistic, they will just cut in the front of a line and justify it. So it's both. We're always both ends of the spectrum. Who has not talked about the feeling that people depend on your help? And how, anyone?
I guess I haven't gone there yet.
Okay.
It's interesting. That's one of the things that I think I have gotten to some degree out of the compulsive aspect of. But it's interesting because I feel like I'm in a corridor now where I'm on my way out of compulsively needing to be needed. And
Yeah.
now being needed is very distressing because it puts me on a thought process of, can I meet this need effectively? If I can, sure, I'll just do it. But then I so often now feel like I can't, and so what's the point? And but it's not acceptable to not meet it, but it is because now I've unleashed this dragon of, I actually want to take care of myself and not always say yes. And so there's more inner conflict around it. So it's not as much of a I must be needed. Now it's a really complicated set of feelings around being needed. There's all this guilt over being annoyed. The annoyance is genuine, but I shouldn't be annoyed because that's not who I am. I'm supposed to be the giver, like.
A good person.
Exactly. A good person wouldn't be annoyed. What the hell's wrong with me?
In Ichazo saw the 2 not as a giver, but as someone that flatters and seduces people with flattery to like them. And giving is a part of that. Whereas those of us that learned the Enneagram without that influence, it's very much about giving and the giver. But there are other types that are giving, naturally giving. 6s, that's why 6s can mistype as 2s. But it is true, the best way to have certainty of having the people in your life that you want there, you actually want everyone to like you. And if there's someone that's difficult, the 2 tries harder. The 7 just goes, and just moves away from that person. That's another way to see the difference between 2 and 7, is that the 2 will try to jokingly bring the difficult person into the fold, so to speak. And they do reach a point of saturation. But even if the 2 just got that difficult person to smile, it's a source of pride. Well, I got him to smile. And then it kind of, those blips of feeling good. So think about when you felt that emptiness or the pangs of not really feeling like you're connected to others. What have you done to help or give when you didn't feel like giving, but you needed it so that you wouldn't feel unsafe?
I think for me, something that hasn't exactly been raised is that for me, when I experience that real compulsion and I know I'm feeling it, not in a little way, in a big way, is when I have to see someone, especially someone, the closer they are to me, the more extreme it is, you know, doing it wrong. I'm just going to say that. Doing it wrong, making a choice that I feel I know is wrong for them, and I know better than they do that that choice is wrong for them. It's like this feeling in the pit of my stomach where it like clenches, and it's just like there's this compulsion, kind of like if you were watching somebody be about to drive off the road and you needed to grab the wheel and take control from them. But that compulsion is to control other people's lives and choices that way, so that they align with how I feel things should go for them. And it's been a continuing journey, and still is, to feel that and pull back the reins and just say, you know what, that's their choice, and they're over there and I'm over here, and they're meant to, you know, live their life their way.
Really tough for it too, because you want to help people bring out the best in them. You want to help them see their potential. And that's why the 2 is often the power behind the throne. And they love mentoring people. The other thing is when we get to the motivation, this need to be needed and appreciated, and to avoid your own neediness is a good one. But if we look at the weaknesses, what you're talking about, I usually do that at the end, but it's a tendency to fall into a style of response characterized by meeting the needs of others for your own purposes, the 2. And overly friendly, behind the scenes manipulators, martyrs, seductive flatterers, an inclination to change to please others. Now, what that doesn't explain is that when the 2 is acting that way, they're feeling separate from themselves. They're feeling tremendous emotional fear and shame about something. It could just be the shame of what's wrong with my personality that people don't want to give to me. 2s don't really like advice any more than an 8. 8s absolutely don't want advice. But if they ask for it, that's another story. But 2s are giving advice. They're advisors more than anything. So when we say giving, I think it's advice more than a thing, more than the presents and the compliments, is you can do it. I'll be right there with you. You know, we worked on that. There's just something, or wait, no, I know you, and this isn't the way you should go on this. You should be more like whatever. And yes, Rachel, thank you so much, because it's the part where each Enneagram type is difficult. And that's when we're trying to feed the compulsive need that arises when our instinct and our type have been triggered. And if it's all 3 types in our Tritype with our instinct, it's almost impossible to not be in the more difficult zone where other people find us difficult, because we're trying desperately to manage something that isn't going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, the 2 feels resentment for the things the 2's been doing. Or if it's not, the advice is not appreciated, or that it came from a good place, and the other person doesn't realize how much effort went into doing that, it really hurts the 2. So that's why it's so important for the two to fill themselves up with knowing who they are before they are offering to others, because that's where twos get into trouble. They move towards others, and then if others aren't moving towards you, you fall flat on your face because you're out too far. Karen Horney did great work with moving towards, moving away, and moving against, and the heart centers all moving towards, and the two is the most moving towards person of the center that moves towards. So you would feel like you do know people's emotions, and you want to help people not make a fool of themselves or look or be their best. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Anyone else on that subject? Because it's, twos get their energy from knowing that people need them and that their help is valuable. One of the core fears of type 2 is the being thought of as dispensable. That is just bone chilling to it too, because you need to be like a forever person in someone's life unless you walk away. But that's even hard for a 2 to do. So this, let me just say, yeah, let's move into the coping strategy. Focusing on the needs and concerns of others, we've talked about that. Becoming indispensable to significant others, or if social, you could try to be indispensable to everyone. And then you end up competing with yourself in a way. So if you gave a gift certificate to one friend for her birthday, and then her next birthday comes along, you have to up it and make it even better than the year before, and then up it and make it even better than that year. So it has to get better and better and better. And it's like the pole vaulter that is improving their ability to jump. Well, twos are doing that with their ability to give to others and be seen as significant. And then, of course, the resentment arises when someone doesn't want your help, when someone feels invaded. And what's really sad, and I'd like you to speak to, is when you've tried so hard to make things wonderful for another person, and it could be for years or months, or the planning of a very special event for a person, and then things didn't go well that you expected, that the two expected, and you as twos would feel disappointed, and there's just this tendency to just tell the other person instead of waiting until you feel more neutral. The emotions rise very quickly, and there's a sharp kind of pot shot or cut in what you'll say. Even if someone's apologized, it comes up again. And then suddenly someone just wipes out all the years or months that you have been doing things to make their life magical, and all the sacrifices. And this really happens where twos do so much, then they're building expectations for themselves while they're trying to create that amazing event for someone else. And it never matches up to reality for the two. Now, the other person might think the event's extraordinary, but if you as twos are not appreciated, or someone didn't do their part, once that emotion is spinning, it has to land, and it's usually pretty quick. And anything you can say about that is really helpful, because it's both, all heart types respond that way because it's kind of the domain of hostility, 2, 3, and 4. But that sudden hostility, even if someone has thanked you, or if they did something that hurt you, they said they're sorry, but you don't feel it, and you have to say it again. Anyone willing
Well,
on that difficult topic and help people understand what's going on with you when that happens?
yeah, I have an example. It's one, okay, so my fiance is watching this. So the first of her birthdays that we had together, I planned a surprise party, and there were, you know, things that didn't go very well, I guess. And she's writing me a Facebook message now, laughing. There were things that didn't go well. She was disappointed. She expressed her disappointment. I was like scandalized by the idea that you would express disappointment when someone planned a surprise for you. So I was so angry and so upset, like so upset, deeply upset at the time. I do hold on to some resentment, only some, not a lot. I don't hold on to a lot, just enough that helps me not be so compulsive about wanting to do things, because I have that little voice in the back of my head saying, it's not going to work anyway. It's okay. And that's, I think, and she can confirm or deny later with me. I think my fiance is good with that, because she's always told me, like, in that period of time in the relationship, it was kind of like, whoa, stop trying so much. She's like, why are you trying so hard? You're good. You're fine. And I was like, I guess this is the voice of health. Okay, so I'll just let that little bit of resentment animate me enough to like take my time for myself. So it's not necessarily resentment anymore, but it's like a little kernel of resentment that I can use to help myself.
You hit on something really important, and that is that when the 2 gets angry, if they're not immediately given whatever it is they perceive they needed, and they don't let it in, they don't feel it down through all their chakras, and it's just up here. Someone saying, I'm sorry, up here, it's not hitting the heart for the 2. You almost have to say you're sorry 3 ways, 3 times. And that's not a criticism of the heart types. It's that heart types naturally compliment people or encourage people. And they do it to be nice at first. And then the second time, well, it's a nice thing to say. But if they go to the effort and tell someone that they did a great job, let's say, doing something, a boss talking about a project, or 2 giving a performance, if they hear it 3 times, it's the first time they really let it in. So with I'm sorry or thank you, the 2 needs to hear it 3 times, not to be difficult, but because they're a heart type that's identified with the parts of themselves that cause shame. Shame is what motivates the 2. But you said something else, like when you get angry, then you have time for yourself. It just doesn't work if you have a long time for yourself, because the need for people comes up again. But yeah, in fact, I believe that 2s do that to have a break from needing to give, because it can be exhausting giving, encouraging, mentoring. As much as 2s love it, it can be overwhelming.
I had a recurring dream in my early 20s that I stopped having after I after I understood what it meant, but I had it so many times before I got it. And it was so simple. A person is talking to me and I fall asleep, and it's okay. I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to respond. I don't have to do anything. and like, just the dream happened a bunch of times. I was like, what a weird dream. It's so just, someone's talking and I'm sleeping. Like, what does it mean? And one day it just clicked. I never had the dream again because I could just think about it when I need to. It's there. It's like one of my resources, that dream.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that relates to that, where you have to, your gift has to be better and better and better, or what happens when you're disappointed? Does it suddenly become sharper than you intended to be? Because you've already, in a way, especially if you have 7 in the Tritype, you've already planned future pleasure with whatever it is you're going to do. And so if someone doesn't do it or doesn't feel it the same way, the instinct is to try and get them to feel it. Like, you know them, so you can figure out the formula. Now, other people can feel manipulated by it, but I will tell you that we love it the rest of the time. We absolutely love it, but it's only when we don't want to do something and the two keeps trying to get us to see their perspective. That's when it's difficult. But if you could just speak to what's going on emotionally, it'd be very helpful for people. So I'd like to hear from each of you.
To which question? You've said several different questions.
Yeah, so this need to give more and more and more, better and better and better, to outdo yourself. You're competing against yourself. Mm-hmm. And then what happens emotionally?
I can give you a couple different examples. When I turned 50, I decided I was going to give myself the birthday party I always wanted. And I invited 19 of my friends to come to Maine to stay in a house, not thinking very many would come. Well, all 19 came. And we had a birthday party. We had a gift every day for the birthdays. Like every day, it was like major swag. Everyone came, they had a bag with their name on it. We were all knitters. And every day, everyone got a present.
For your birthday.
For my birthday, because it's everyone else's unbirthday, so right. Mm-hmm. And every day it just got better and better and better. You know, the presents would just build and get. They had a whole bag when the whole week was over. And on the very last day, everyone had to sit in the room, and everyone got a gift one at a time of a shawl that I had knit. I knit each person, which is, if you're a knitter, you know that's kind of a big deal. And it culminated. Everything was bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger and better each and every time. And I didn't realize at the time, I think stepping back from it now, I realize it. At the time I was doing it because it was fun, and who doesn't want to have fun? And it made some people uncomfortable because they felt like it was too generous. And that's where I kind of overstepped. I don't ever think that anyone's needs to be reciprocal in that way. That's never my thought. When I give something to someone, I'm giving it from my heart or because I really want to. But it did make some people uncomfortable. And then as time has gone on, they're like, oh, that's Cindy. That's just how she is. She's overwhelming. She's over the top. And so that kind of comes with the territory for me as a 2. And then your other question about the emotions, I had something just happen fairly recently where
well, like if they didn't appreciate those shawls. Go into what you were going to share, but
no, they did appreciate the shawls for sure.
Go to the crazy idea.
Oh, if they didn't, I would have been heartbroken because it would have meant that I didn't do the right thing. I didn't choose the right color for that person. I chose everyone's favorite color. Everyone got a questionnaire like 3 months before the event. with a bunch of questions. What do you like? What's your favorite food? Everything. No one had any idea that I was trying to dig for their favorite color so I could knit a shawl in their favorite color, until it was all over. And then they're like, oh, that's why you asked all the questions, you know? But it would have been devastating, because I'm an event coordinator and I travel internationally for a living. So I'm stuck at home, which is why I'd love to be able to Zoom all the time, but it's not the same for me because I'm used to going and doing and being at so many places. I am beginning to Zoom more, which is great. But I'm out there with all those people and I'm doing my best. I can have 100 people in a room and 99 of them say they're having the most amazing, wonderful time. One person will be mad, and that's the thing I'll fixate on. That one person that's mad or upset, I'll want to figure out how I can get their food, a different plate of food that will make them happier, or move them to a different hotel room, or what's it going to take to make that one person that's unhappy, it becomes more important than the 99 that are happy. And then the emotion behind.
Yeah, we'll talk about that though, because there's a corresponding resentment that's growing as you try to do this and that to make the person, like if you then figure out how to make them happy, then it feels good again. But sometimes it doesn't work that way.
And it's true. And sometimes it doesn't. Nothing I'm going to do. There's one event, there was a woman, nothing I was going to do is make her happy. And I was damn determined I was going to make her happy. And I did everything. And finally, I was very upset. I was like, can you believe it? I've done everything I know how to do, and she's still not happy. And I was going to be really happy if she never signed up to come to another event. Do you know that the very next event, she was the second person to sign up? It was like crazy. But
she wasn't as unhappy as you thought, or it was worth it, but you're talking from your head, and this is really hard for twos to bring down. And tears, I think that's why twos cry a lot, is that when they do connect, it just becomes more physical and the tears show up, or anger. What's hard is to actually talk about your feelings. See, feeling types aren't better about talking about their feelings. They do something with the feelings, and each type does it differently. But go ahead.
Yeah, I will cry through mine. I also will write, and I'll be very effusive, and I'll just emote, and then click send and wish I wouldn't have sent it an hour later.
Because?
Because the other person can't accept the emotions. I'm so emotional. I forget that other people aren't like that. I forget that they don't feel things as deeply as I do, or that they can't handle emotion. I have this one friend, and she says, I'm just not an emotional person. We're just not wired that way. Or, I'm just not wired that way. And then here I come, and I'm so overly emotional that it's really difficult for her. And it's kind of like I have these unspoken contracts, and sometimes they even are spoken contracts. We're going to do this, we're not going to do that. But boy, if somebody breaks that contract, look out. Because again, I'm the historian. I don't forget anything. We agreed to this, and boy, you didn't do it. That's hard for me too. And I get very emotional about things like that as well. Because I think everyone should remember like I remember, but I don't forget anything.
Well, the important thing the two has to realize is that whatever it is, it's something the two was pushing for, not the other person. So the other person doesn't remember making that agreement because it was what was important to the two. And then when it's not fulfilled, it really makes the two sad, so they get angry, because tears can make us impotent in communicating what's bothering us, but anger is like an anesthetic, and that's when the two will say that, well, That
Yep.
thing, because they haven't heard it enough or in the right way.
And in a lot of times it is enough or in the right way. I had a friend who just, we had this thing and she apologized several times. I'm really sorry. I forgot that we said that we were going to do this. You know, I've been with COVID. It's been really hard. I wanted to do this thing for you. And she apologized. She apologized and she apologized. And it was okay. But then I realized I had to go back one more time and say, but remember when we said you weren't going to do this and I wasn't going to do that. And then when I looked at it later, I was like, why did I even say that to her? You know what I mean? She's already apologized, but it was like you said, it wasn't in the way that my heart needed to feel it or I needed to hear it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's a hallmark of 2, actually. That it, you know, we talk about the 4 doesn't let go, but I find all 9 types don't let go of something in a certain way. And with the 2, if you feel someone has hurt you, it's really important that the other person say to you that their apology in a way that makes you as a 2 feel like they get it the way you want them to get it. And it may not be a part of their personality, maybe a different value system, and each 2 is going to do it differently. But there is a script, not just do bills. Heart types have scripts that they're giving to people. It's just other people don't have the script. And they have a different experience because they're coming from their own reality. So that's excellent, Cindy. That is absolutely a hallmark of 2. And when a 2 begins to learn that others don't know the script, they can be getting and understand the fact that you as a 2 have been hurt, but they're going to say it in their own way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's counterfeit to people. Mm-hmm. But if it's a close relationship, it's good to keep trying anyhow. The 2 to try and be more and more open to different ways of saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Cindy. That's really important.
Thanks.
I want to ask for questions, but is there anyone else that wants to say anything more on this topic?
You asked about the emotion,
yeah.
And
yeah, the true emotion, not the hostility. The hostility is just trying to protect.
When I let myself start to feel disappointment, I was like shocked how painful it was, because I was doing this thing of, oh, it doesn't matter, we'll get along, life goes on. And then when I said, yeah, you know, I don't like that one, I am really, really disappointed. It's the experience, well, the disappointment was huge in my heart. And then if I feel rejected by somebody that's there is a close relationship with, it's like this burning arrow that's like from the top of my abdomen, or a lightning bolt through my heart and maybe even up, but especially just below the solar plexus through my chest. And it's red and it's crushing. It's like I'm broken apart. That's not the right word. It's crushing.
And with 9 in the Tritype, there would be a part of you that would feel you shouldn't say anything, but then the 2 would say, well, you should be able to say something. And if you're right, you should tell the person. But if it doesn't change the person, even if you're right, that's what the 2 is dying over, that they actually know that they're correct and they've shared from their heart, and maybe they've even shared in a way that wasn't angry and upset, and they realize they're still not going to get what they need. And that's the point where the two just collapses in. So crushed is a good word, but
it's also pierced. Yeah, crushed, but pierced. Sorry.
But what?
Pierced. It's like just all the way through.
Oh, pierced.
Yes.
Yeah. Pierced is a really, in many ways, a better word because it's piercing the heart. And we all think that if we do the work of discovering our Enneagram type and Tritype and instinctual stacking, that we can then communicate what we need. And one of the most painful things is when we realize, oh, that doesn't mean I'm going to get it. But as children, when our need became a problem to people, we either made our need louder or we just stopped sharing that we had that need. So the hope is that when we finally can talk about it, we'll get it. But it doesn't work that way. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. And that's why filling ourselves up is so much more important. And in the case of the two, there's no way to really manipulate the heart if someone doesn't want to do it. They might go through the motions, but that doesn't feel good to a two. But if someone's willing to go through the motions that they don't want to do, it actually does say, I care about you. So that's kind of the growing edge for anyone, but twos in particular. It's like, they're doing what they don't want to do. They're saying you matter. Okay, anything else before I open to questions?
I was just going to add to that last point. I think there's a nice corollary for us twos where we've gotten over a really wonderful hump when we can accept an apology that isn't like the perfect apology, when you can see the other person bending themselves to try to do the thing that you've told them you want, and it's not quite but you're like, no, I see that you're trying, and that's great, and I'm good. Like that's kind of like the same thing, right? It's that, like, you know, I can accept, I can like bridge that gulf that way.
It's like seeing things with greater reality and not personalizing it.
Yeah. And just like see, it's just like it's also just like another way of seeing the other person. Like
well, it comes down. It doesn't stay up here.
Right.
Like when you can let it go to your heart, which you're defended against, by the way, in those moments. The heart is not open if someone's hurt our feelings, if I'm a two. But then if they say they're sorry, it should make it better, and it doesn't. It's because the two is saying, I don't feel it.
Yeah.
I don't feel yours being sorry. And that really means the two isn't open, and the person saying they're sorry isn't open. And that's hard for people to do, is where both people are open, and those are the best apologies.
And we're attached to our expectation in our two place.
It's all about the expectation, totally attached.
It's also like really empowering to be able to say, I got the apology, I mostly forgive you, now let me go sit by myself for 10 minutes and finish forgiving you. Like I just now need to process it. Like, I heard you, I can't expect anything more from you. Like I've learned that. I know, like you've given me the apology, now I gotta go and figure out how to get it all the way down to my heart. So I'll need some space for that.
To integrate it.
Yeah.
And allow for the disappointment that you will not necessarily get it in the future either. But it's not a reflection of you mattering.
But I also think the intuitive part of I feel like I'm pretty intuitive too. But I also feel like I can sense if that person is genuinely sorry or not. And if I haven't felt that yet, that's why I still have that, need to go around one more way to remind them one way to get it that way that I feel is genuine and authentic. It's kind of, because okay, I can say I'm sorry to you, but I don't actually feel it. And until I feel it, I'm not ready to, I'm a pretty forgiving person, but it's letting it go.
Mm-hmm. It's a trap for a 2,
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Yeah.
2s craft how they say things. So even when they're being critical, they've tried to say it the perfect way. But if it's a wound to the 2,
Mm-hmm.
and someone's not saying it the way the 2 needs, the 2 is going to keep pushing for it,
Mm-hmm.
pushing for it. And
it's typically with someone who's very close. I mean, it's not the average Joe, but it's typically someone who's very important.
Some people it's with others, but you want more of an apology if they're closer.
Mm-hmm.
And there are methodologies for getting there. And I use them in couples work, obviously, because they're so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But until the 2 understands that others feel like they've apologized, maybe they wouldn't have been upset by what the 2 was upset over. So it's complicated for the other type. Just the fact that they're willing to say it, it then becomes the burden of the 2 to let in, even if it's just a little, and just watch yourself want to bring it up again later and again and again. And the thing is, the 2 wants that closeness so much, but doing that, bring it up again in different scenarios, it means it's unresolved within the 2.
Right.
And it becomes a defense pattern on a defense. And it never gets the 2 what they want. And that's where I'm saying you could have years of being an extraordinary friend, and then there's something you just can't let go of, and you need to say it, and then all of a sudden the person can just go away. And that shocks the 2, because the 2 hangs in there and is believing, I'm finally saying what I haven't said this whole time. Mm-hmm. And then it's not received with someone really being apologetic in a really emotionally meaningful way. Mm-hmm. That's what 4s and 3s want as well. It's where the heart types get into trouble. Expectation. They have an image of the way it needs to be. And the reason that image needs to be there is the whole persona has been built on the self that people like. So we all have a mask, but the 2s have perfected their mask to focus on others. And it just plain hurts when someone doesn't understand what you need. And it's always when the 2 is asking for a need to be met. Mm-hmm. Always.
Because you have to be very vulnerable to ask for what you need.
Exactly.
So when you finally do ask and it's rejected, that's what you talk about, piercing.
Yeah. So this is the way through for 2s. This is the growing edge. Say, oh, wait, if that person didn't care at all, they'd ignore me. Right. They wouldn't try, even if it was for only 3 minutes. Right. Or sometimes 2s will say, well, the person just said they're sorry to get off the hook. Well, even that is still saying that you have enough of an impact on them that they're going to do that, even if it's just to get off the hook. And that's hard for any Enneagram type to do. It's just how do we act it out? And that's what we've been talking about. The high side of the 2 is the two is cheerleaders for people. They love people being happy and succeeding, especially if they were a part of it. It's more enjoyable, like helping someone rehearse their lines of life, so to speak. It'll make a two very happy to have that kind of impact on someone. And if the person realizes that the two has created an environment for the person to be more, and they say so to the two, nothing feels better. But if they don't remember, because of this historical part of two, the remembering everything, it hurts anew. Wait, it's been forgotten that I said that first, or that I mentioned that, or I put that person on that path. And if they don't attribute it to the two, or by accident attribute it to someone else, that's another crushing experience, which makes the two then not want to be crushed, so the two gets angry, and then the other person tries to calm down the two, and then the two doesn't feel like the person has brought it to their heart. So the two has to go back to what was happening with their heart. Were they helping that person altruistically, or was it always a transaction? And honestly speaking, it's always a transaction, but not a false transaction. It's just the other person does not realize they've made a deal with you that's in cement. And it varies with each two as to how that shows up. But yeah, thank you. So is there anything anyone else wants to say? Or actually, I can take, we have time for probably one or two questions. If there's anyone in the group, just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Actually, Catherine, I have a question that I'd like to understand better about the two. By the way, I really am touched by the panel, everybody who gave themselves and me information. It really touched my heart to hear all that. I want to understand the difference between the two that says, I know what's best for you, and the reformer tendency of the one. Because you talked about, okay, so that's my question.
Yeah, so the reformer is only an aspect of type 1, and it's trying to change things, and it's the movement of the sexual one into creating an improved whatever. And then the movement is into 2, and that's kind of the way the Enneagram points connect to one another and kind of add to each other. It's a process, the Enneagram of process. But if you're asking me how they're different, it's that the one is, they both will do this, but the one is telling you what you should or shouldn't do, morally speaking. And the 2 is telling you in every way, not just morally, but as a person, in this situation, in that situation. It's not by chance that all the people that focus on etiquette are 2s. We would think they'd be 1s, but it's about people. And a lot of them are 2s. So much we've given 2 away to a lot of the other types. And so if we just pull that back in, that's 2. So, and if you look at the collage, I have a woman in the corner that people think is an 8. And you can see it at katherinefauvre.com on the 2 page. She's just saying, well, I told you so. You know, I told you not to go that way. or you should do this. You know, don't let him do that to you, or don't let her say that. There's just the advice giving. Whereas the one is saying it's wrong to do that, or you don't want anyone to see you acting that way. There is overlap, but think of the center it's coming from and the locus of authority. And the 2, 3, and 4 are dependent on others.
It's such an important distinction. That was one of my confusions for so long, that I thought I was social with a 1 wing, 9 with a 1 wing, and missed totally that distinction Katherine just made.
Yeah.
So what, I'm sorry, go ahead, Katherine.
I have a question about the sad twos you've talked about.
Yes.
And when you refer to that, can you explain more of what you mean? The sadness was always part of my shame. So I'm curious.
And do you cry easily, or do you look sad a lot of the time, or do you hide it?
I would say both. It depends on who I'm with.
And
if it's close, I'll cry a lot. But if it's not close, I'll hide it.
And did you have painful experiences in childhood?
Oh, yes.
So those are imprints.
Yeah.
And you could be any Enneagram type and be the sad character. It's just when we think of the defense strategy of sadness, we think of the 4, but it's melancholy. It's not sad. It couldn't be melancholy and sad. But when a 2, it's emotional like a 4, is identified with sadness, then they're either trying to cheer people up more, or they're secretly, privately feeling really sad about those things that they want to get angry about. But they know if they get angry about those things that they know, they will be rejected further.
Perfect. Thank you.
So it can't live. It has to be in suspended animation. But the tone of what we deal with as adults, that's the part of nurture. We're directly impacted by the losses and shame we felt as a child. Shame in particular for the 2s, the heart type. We can talk further if anyone wants to.
We didn't say pride, but it was all around. I mean, we did in the beginning, but it was all around what we were saying as we hide our needs.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'm so glad you said that, Linda, because 2s hide their needs and don't. So the needs telegraph in ways that the 2 doesn't realize. But the specifics of their need maybe are hidden, or if the person wouldn't know anything about that. But what happens is the 2 just gets, they're more the type to just put something down hard or close a cupboard a little stronger. It's just releasing that emotion. But yeah, there is sadness around everything, because think of what you have to do according to your defense strategy to be loved, to have a role in people's lives. That's why the fears of being dispensable, that you could be discarded, that you don't have any value anymore. And that terrible pain when you've crossed that line with someone where they just say they don't want to meet your need anymore, or they ignore you.
I think that's one thing that we maybe didn't say much earlier. That ultimate motivation of love, to ultimately get that love, to feel that love in the way that we need to feel it, or I need to feel it. We all have our own ways to feel it. is definitely the motivation for most things we do on a subconscious level. I don't think, oh, I'm gonna, do my son's laundry because I need him to love me back. But that is actually probably an underlying thing. Well, this would be a loving kind thing to do. So I do think
a really good person would do that.
Exactly.
Above and beyond good would do that.
Right. But it ultimately comes back down to the love that ultimately, that
Yes.
need to be loved, feel loved. And again, it's not a conscious thing. I don't feel like it's a conscious thing, but in a way, maybe it really is, because you genuinely need to feel that here in your heart to really get it.
And the truth of the matter is, it would be nice if he appreciated it, you doing his laundry. But what feels the best is how you feel about yourself when you're doing it. And if you feel resentful, then that resentment then poisons your happiness. And if you feel love when you're doing it, then that perpetuates that feeling of love. But it's all within the person doing it. In this case, the two with the two defense. It's like resentment is the key to unraveling all the good work that the two does. And it's very hard for the two to realize when they're at that line where if they just go a little too far, it's going to push someone away.
Yeah, and that rejection is the worst, because that's the worst pain, because then there's no love.
Then there's no love. That's why twos don't like to directly say things. They'd rather kind of couch how they say it and try to make sure they can be holding on to the person while they're saying shame on you, but don't go away. All types struggle with it in a different way, depending on their strategy, which we'll see when I do the panels with the other types.
And the love that twos have is mostly a genuine love that is just for other people. You want the best for them. You want them to be their best. So here, let me help you be your best. Help me, it just comes from within, this well within.
And then
could I ask about that in terms of the phrase masks? I really agree with what Cindy just said, that I'm having a very hard time with the distinction of what is essentially a provisional identity, not a complete identity, but a true and authentic identity with giving and loving and caring and supporting, and hearing it called a mask just because it meets a need. That doesn't quite ring true or feel accurate. So I think mask is a shortcut. It's just a word that we use as a shortcut, but that isn't, sometimes once in a while it might just be a mask, but mostly I believe it isn't. It's a piece of your actual identity, maybe not your whole identity.
Yeah, well, the identity, like with the centers, we were talking about it, is that if the heart types take themselves to be their idealized image, then they're missing parts of themselves that are in their shadow. And they're not all bad in their shadow. There's a lot of good that's in the shadow of a heart type. And I would say for every Enneagram type, for every human being, we develop a mask, but we can take it off. But the feelings that arise that are loving are always genuine. It's only when it's a habit and we're doing it and then we're resentful that it's not appreciated. And then that's like identifying with who the heart type needed to become in order to be loved. And that's why it's so confusing to a heart type, because you know that just fully being yourself didn't work. That you still had your heart broken. And when you modified and amplified what people liked about you, you were appreciated more. You got more positive feedback. And that's all well and good, except sometimes heart types can take themselves to be this idealized false self, because the pain of letting in just this much rejection is excruciatingly painful. And I would say that's true of every Enneagram type, but it shows up differently because we all want love and safety, every one of us. But what do we do to get it? And how do we feel about what we have to do to get it? Like as an 8, I have to conform to things that I think are stupid. But I can't just have everything be, the world according to Katherine. I made a joke about it years ago, but then I thought, well, there kind of is truth in that. I would like, I had a skylight where I could just put my finger up and touch the wall and it would open, close. It was just amazing. And I thought, yeah, that's the ultimate power, to have convenience, but be able to have things the way I wanted them. But expecting it is where every type gets into trouble, and expecting others to really know what we're feeling. They might have an idea, they might be able to put themselves in our shoes, but they don't really know the complexity of what we're feeling and the process that we're going through. And whatever mechanism that we're using as a defense is a mystery to others until the Enneagram. Once we have the Enneagram, we begin to understand these strategies and realize that they need to be there. It's part of being human. And it's all about love, Fran, for all 9 types. Just the free flowing of love. It doesn't feel exhausting. It doesn't feel uncomfortable. We don't even need to think about it other than perhaps like the joy it would bring to us as well. That is always real. Always. Because it's coming from, it's not being kind of put on.
Yeah.
It's coming this way energetically.
I'm sorry. No, you go ahead.
Can't receive it. Go ahead.
I'm curious because I have a lot of 2s in my life that I love dearly. I'm an 8 myself, and I guess what I would like to know, I know this is a hard question, there's no simple answer, but like, what would you say is a good way to draw loving boundaries with sensitive 2s? Like I have, as an 8, I'm incredibly honest and direct, and I, have a resistance to softening things, but yet I want to be received by the people I love the most, of course, and everyone ideally. And so I guess, yeah, if there's an easy way to answer that question, I would love to know from you 2s. And thank you all so much for being so vulnerable and open with everything today.
And if you don't mind answering, Fran, as well, we have 3 2s that can answer that. Cindy?
Oh, let Linda go first.
Linda?
So I think for me, the most important thing, if you're being direct, is what we covered earlier. Let me know you heard or see me. And that just, I'll soften, I can hear you and personalize it less on most days. You know, and if I go off and cry, I'll come back and be willing to talk about it, but point out when it's too much from your side.
How can she show you that she sees you? Break it down, because that's a tough one for, if you're not a particular Enneagram type, you don't really know how, but the 2 wants to be seen and mirrored. How?
So what I don't, Bree, do you want to give just a 3-word example? Or you just want to say something to say too much, or, I mean.
Oh goodness. I mean, the hardest relationship is that with my mother, who is a 2. And so I think that, and her love language is gift giving and acts of service. And I'm always, you know, getting things that I don't need or particularly want, but I want her to know that I appreciate that she's always thinking of me, but I don't want all the things all the time. It's like a simple example.
Yeah. For me, it would be hard for her, I would predict. Mm-hmm. But it's more than just saying, I know you mean well. That doesn't even get to here. It's like up here someplace. Certainly I care about you. And it would be maybe delineating, if she's open. I always like to make contracts. Is this a time we could talk? Yes or no? And then maybe delineating what is helpful and what is not helpful.
So you would like it if someone says, is this a good time to talk about something?
Yeah. Maybe everybody wouldn't. You just, I don't know.
Yes,
I agree.
I hate that.
I thought so, yeah.
Well, I would say, before I knew it was your mother, if it were a friend, for me, I've had 3 or 4 different close friends who were 8s. 2 of them worked out well and 2 did not. And the difference for me was I being used? My givingness, my support, everything that I did or sacrificed on behalf of the relationship was just taken as entitled in 2 of these relationships. And I didn't start out resenting it, but I ended up resenting it. In the other 2 relationships with 8s, they dove down to the real heart of it and could really say to me, you don't have to do that. That's not what I love about you. It is not everything you do and everything you give, and kind of released me from that self-imposed obligation and let me know it was just me. It was about who I was, that was an important part of me. They appreciated, but I didn't have to earn that friendship that way. And so if you can do that with her, I think that is a way to get out of it.
You know, it's interesting, Fran, in Naranjo's book, he talks about narcissism and the types it applies to. And he puts it with 8, but when he teaches, he'll say, well, you know, an average 8 is playfully sadistic in the way they tease, but otherwise the 8 is a taker, and other types are takers if they're narcissistic. So he said that he just wrote about the narcissistic types because that's what is not working. That's the part that's too much. So if you read Naranjo's books, I don't know if you have, but then you can kind of go, all righty then. But he actually didn't believe there was anything good about the ego. Whereas, you know, if you think, hey, that's a biological imperative. We need someone that will look to the emotional needs of others for mankind to survive. Someone's got to have that job. Someone's got to be willing to just take something on behalf of the many. We need all of them. But yeah, I think you're also talking about narcissism, don't you think?
Oh, most definitely. The 2 that didn't work out, you could say that was their diagnosis.
Because it is all about with a narcissist, whatever Enneagram type they are, it's you would feel used no matter what. But sometimes the grandiose narcissist will thank you or say you're great, but still just keep using. And that's
But
harder
in the 8,
for too.
yes, in the 8 that really worked out, who's still one of my closest friends, she was involved with a lot of spiritual work and work on herself. And she just gave me the freedom to be who I was. And it was clear that she accepted it and appreciated it and could be blunt and direct and clear about herself. And that was such a relief. So there was a good combination there of the 8. And also I like to be able to fight with someone who doesn't hold a grudge. So there's that too. I don't know if she's able to do that, or you can give that kind of freedom to fight and still be okay with each other.
Yeah, can you, Bree, with your 2s?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Generally, 8s don't hold a grudge. If it's so bad that the 8 has kicked you out of their circle of care and they've taken away your e-ticket, they give you a couple chances to come back, but you just don't exist anymore after that. If those chances didn't work out and you betrayed the 8, it's about 3 times, but in lesser ways, 8s are constantly having to go back on their own word. That's why they don't like to say things, because they feel they must uphold it. So if you do that 3 times, you're out of here. Or that's what I say to my kids. Okay, 3 times, and then it's direct disobedience. And then there are consequences. But really, they might do them 4 or 5 times. And I'd say, okay, do you want to earn it back? Your privileges. So the 8 isn't as harsh as they can appear or as they think they should be, if they have that ability to remember what it was like to be, if they have empathy, a greater degree of empathy. I'll put it that way. And some people are just born with that little short strand of empathy, and other people, regardless of type, are born with that longer strand of empathy. It's really helpful to know that. Sometimes we can't expect it of people. And then you give them a tough childhood, close down more of that empathy, what they have. So an 8 that's empathetic and wants you to be you is a great friend. I like my 8 friends who are that way. And I don't enjoy the 8 associates, so to speak, people that I know, but I don't consider them a great friend, because it isn't about me as a person and us together. It's about what they want to take, as you said. It's a really good word, because that's what the unhealthy part of 8 does. It takes, because the 8 doesn't believe it'll ever be given to them. And they can't endure longing. That's a really good point. Is there anything else, Bree, with that?
No, that was really helpful, Fran. Thank you so much.
Can I just ask real quick, is your mom a really sensitive person?
Yeah.
It's just like a crier like me?
She's a little more comfortable with her anger parts that kind of can see. It's so interesting to me how the 2 and the 8 connect. I think it's just one of the most interesting connections of the Enneagram. I mean, maybe it's because I'm part of it, so it's a selfish thing, but I just...
Well, yeah, and there's a line of connection to 2.
Yeah, that is just, yeah.
And it depends on the Tritype too, and the instinct. What do you think her Tritype is?
That I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with that. I'm learning now.
If she's more comfortable with the anger, she could have 8 is her gut type.
The only reason I ask is because if my daughter did this, she's a 6, but she, I sent them, here's an example. I sent them an air purifier because my son-in-law has asthma, and anyway, and she's finally like, Mom, I love you. I don't want you to take this personally, because I do take everything personally. No matter what, I'm going to take it personally. She's like, I'm going to tell you, I love you. And that was the most important thing, is I love you. I love that you thought to do this for me. I love that you were thinking of Kyle. Because that's it. I'm loving, and I'm thinking, and I'm wanting to do the best. And she said, but that was a little over the top. So can we maybe tame down the gifts a little bit? You know what I mean? It was kind of, and then I was like, well, okay, fine. She's like, Mom, I have the money. I could afford to get that if I wanted to. And she does. So from a sensitive to that, the whole, I love you, thank you for thinking of me, reiterating that was piece of cake. I didn't shed a tear or anything. It was pretty great.
And Cindy, every two is sensitive.
Yeah.
Every single one. Sensitive to be taken for granted more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think for some twos, Bree, if you say what you need, like define what you as an 8 needs, that are the gifts she can give you. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's let me make my choices, but define it as in terms of a gift. Trust me enough, or whatever. That might help.
I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you both.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what I didn't say directly is how in kind of Latin cultures, especially Spanish-speaking Latin cultures, but even in the, Arab cultures, two-ness is really revered because it's a strong person that has feeling and can connect to another person. Whereas, as I did mention a little bit, where the 8 is kind of just like a big sledgehammer that comes down without warning to most people. I mean, it might seem like there's no warning, but the 8 feels they've been warning all along. But it's kind of more of a Western idea that manipulation is bad. Because what are politicians? What are ambassadors? You have to see the good and say it in a graceful, nice way. So they feel that they're more powerful for that reason. But the self-identity of the 2 is that I can make a difference. Mm-hmm. If you just let me, as a 2, I can make a difference. But if you don't let me, I don't know who I am. So I think Linda's suggestion is really good. If you could give her guidelines, yeah, Mom, I love it when you do this kind of stuff, blah, 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 but I'm just not going to like that other stuff. And what happens is 2s will think, oh, you're just saying that, and give it to you anyway. And that's because the 2 is telling you to keep trying with them, that they really do want something. They just don't want to overtly say it. Like a 2 would like it if someone said, no, I'm going to do it anyhow. Because 2s are really good at giving, but can be really hard at receiving. If they start to feel like someone's giving them more than they're giving, it can kind of hit an existential place of my value. I'm losing my value, at least with that person. So that's the growing edge for the 2 as well, is to realize that even if someone gives more, that you're, as a 2, always thinking about other people. So you're giving even if it's not directly landing with the person in the moment. Like Cindy with your boys, where you got them the, I mean, that's such a 2 thing.
Yeah, the Magic the Gathering, the boys all play it. And now that we're COVIDed in, my boys are in their 30s. And now that we're COVIDed in, I'm actually learning to play this stinking game so I can hang out with them because I want to be with them. We're all living in this house together at the moment. But this new one came out. I was telling Catherine I had pre-ordered it for Christmas for my nephew and my two sons. Pre-ordered it. Pardon me?
Famous last words.
Right.
Before Christmas part.
Before Christmas part. Well, then they knew because they were telling me about it. I'm like, oh, this is great. Where would I buy this? So they knew I was buying it. Well, gosh, it arrived and they're like, well, we're not waiting until Christmas. We know we have it. Let's open it now. So I let them open it now. And then I went and ordered some to give them for Christmas later. That's hidden upstairs,
And why did you let them open it now?
Because it brought me such joy to watch them open it. They were so happy. Like they were so excited and happy.
And that's why a lot of twos like the 7 card that has joy on it, because joy is very motivating to a 2. Bringing joy to others. And that's what 2 and 7 share. Whereas 7s are in pursuit of joy. The 2 is like giving a little, like a fairy godparent, giving little moments of joy. Whereas the 7's more like the fairy, that it could be a prank or, a package. Both are happening because it's more mental and it's kind of in the future. But 7s can still have that quality, like I call them the angels of mercy, when they decide that someone really needs something. They could do something extraordinary, but it would be a one-off. Like buy an extraordinary gift or pay for something or do something. But it's not like the 2 where it's ongoing. But usually they have 7 in a tritype. It's that 7-2 combination. But again, so much of type 2 was put into 7. So we got to kind of take it back and put it back where it belongs in type 2. I think people are going to type much better once they understand that, and the errors in the transmission of the 2.
For what it's worth,
I'm going to leave it on because it is really important, the errors. Let's say someone needed the air cleaner, Cindy. Maybe they would have gotten it in black instead of white, or it's too big, or they'd want a quieter one, or so that's.
You want to understand, Catherine. I researched. I got the best, the quietest, the top of the line. I mean, so no, that was all taken care of. I'm just saying.
And was there space for it?
Yeah, and I knew exactly where they could put it in their house, and took care of all the things first, right? But I do think Linda's right. Asking is good. I'm not that disciplined. I wish I could be more like you to say, would it be okay if I bought you an extra gift, or if I bought you the filters to go with this air, the filters for next year when you need to replace them, which I actually did buy them a year in advance. But I didn't ask that. I just went ahead and bought them. So now they have them for next year.
Well, I think
that's a learned thing, maybe, because I appreciate that in you. I wish I were more like that.
I think you're conflating something. It's if the 2 also gets in trouble for asking questions like that. It's a fine line, because then people feel like you're trying to give me something again. And it feels invasive, even though the 2 doesn't mean it that way. The 2 is trying to compensate and not be too much by asking, is it okay if we talk now? Or why not just wait for a good time to talk? Why ask? Well, the 2 is trying to have good timing. And the 2 tries not to come on, over the top, and then they modify it, and then they ask permission, but it all feels invasive. Timing is everything. Don't get the timing right, all your efforts can go unappreciated. And the reason on the other side of it is the other person is saying, what do you want from me? Wait, why are you doing this? Because it's human nature to then feel like, what am I going to have to pay back?
Right.
And even if you know for a fact that person does not expect you to pay anything back, it can still feel that way in people because it's human nature to be wary of the Trojan horse, so to speak. Like, how is this going to come back and be an issue later? So it's like, don't give it to me. But now, on the other hand, someone that's narcissistic will just take and take and take until you don't have anything left to give. And that happens to a lot of twos, a lot of twos.
Yes. And then they expect it so much. And that's when a two finally gets to the point where something happens and the two draws the line in the sand, but then the two is done. Okay, now I'm done with you. And when you get to that point, that's not a good place. It's very rare that it happens, but boy, when you get to that point, boy, it's over. I'm done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people believe that twos can't get there, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just built up to a point where the two then just says, well, they kind of move, to another place, another person, and put their efforts where they're going to be appreciated and they feel good about the giving.
Mm-hmm.
But when twos have a terrible time with people not appreciating how much, it's like the iceberg. We only see the top part of what the two has done. Right. We don't see all the other stuff the two did to make that top part even show. It's extraordinary. And in a way, we don't want to know, because if we do know, we might feel that we have to match it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to say something, Fran?
I was just going to add to this that over the many years of mistakes, etc., I've just learned to wait until someone asks for something. And that's hard to do. But this friend that I was talking about, where we finally split, we had been like sisters for decades. I was godmother to her children. And I finally just had to put it aside. And I was quite surprised at myself, how easily I let it go and how I have not regretted it, because I was being so used.
Mm-hmm. It almost, hindsight, doesn't it, to fully let in how long you were being used, because you're in the hope triad. So you can...
I love the iceberg analogy. That's perfect.
That is really a great analogy.
I could use the iceberg analogy in a number of different ways with the types, but in this case with the two, people don't have a clue really how much went into whatever the two is doing for the other. But yeah, when the two is over, they're over.
Mm-hmm. But when I'm giving everything from everything I've got, everything that I possibly can do.
That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true. That's the high side of two. And we love twos for that. We really do. It's the only time any of us really struggle is when the defense strategy of the person we're dealing with is just on overdrive. Normal aspects of the defense strategy are fine for all of us. We might not always like it, but we understand, and that's just the way they are. But when someone goes into overdrive with their type, especially their instinct, that's when we're all like, whoa, it doesn't matter what type we are. But two types that can be really taken advantage of are the, well, I guess I would say they all have 2 in the Tritype because of that desire to give.
But I also have people that question that why do you give so much? And then
For sure.
it's kind of like, it's just, I will say it's who I am. But some people are like, oh, I'm not used to having anyone do anything for me. You know, what is it you want from me? I'm thinking, I don't want anything from you. I mean, subconsciously, it's the love driving it.
Yeah,
I just want to be your friend or whatever. But,
rapport,
pardon me?
the friendship, the rapport, the
Yes.
companionship.
Mhm. But there have been some people who have just their whole life been so secluded or never had anyone that would do anything for them. Oh my God, I've never had anyone that would bring me dinner before. I've never had anybody that would, you know, bring me a sack of groceries when I got home from the hospital. And I'm just like, really? But I grew up on a farm in the Midwest. And some of those things were ingrained in me. You do for your neighbors. And so as a 2 boy, then I just doubled.
Yeah, you just doubled down on that
Mm-hmm.
and gave even more.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's so true. And when people understand why the 2 is doing what they're doing, and the 2 hurts just as much as every other type, and to truly have empathy, we need to see each Enneagram type in their totality and what's at the root of it. And it all goes to a single place, and that's that we all want love and safety. Mm-hmm. And then our defenses are the tracking machines we have, what we're meant to track, and what we're meant to give to the world, and what's needed. So the 2 is needed to track people's emotions. In business, you need someone that'll do that. A lot of times people say, well, we don't need anyone to track emotions. We need someone to track a project. I said, if people aren't on target emotionally, that project's not going to be completed the way you think, or you want. Because some businesses would think, I don't want emotional people. I said, then you're missing a whole category of intelligence. And then other businesses don't want the thinking types, but then they're missing all the know-how that can come from the thinking types. We just need average to mature versions of whatever type, and they're pleasant and a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think part of what's helped me in my growth when I'm getting to the other side of trying to learn how I can be a better me and not overgive and overwhelm is the differentiation, understanding what is really mine, what is really yours. So when people come to me and say something that I can understand, that's been pretty big for me, and kind of coming into who I am as a 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a self-aware 2.
Mm-hmm.
Coming into your own as self-aware 2 means you have to separate rather than the enmeshment, the tendency to enmesh and become like part of the fabric of the other individual, and to see that you are 2 different fabrics, complementary. But the person doesn't have to see the world the way you do, or want what you want to give, or give you what you would like, but you can enjoy what you share in common and the different ways that you would be able to do for each other, even if you're totally different. And the self-aware 2 doesn't feel anymore obligated to keep improving how they give.
Agreed.
I was going to say resentment became my measuring stick. And that has been true for years. Maybe it's the 6 in my Tritype, but it actually works for me to say to myself, okay, if I'm going to give $350, I'm going to feel resentful. If I give 300, I won't. I mean, I can divide what I should and shouldn't do exactly. by where that resentment threshold is. And if I can give and let it go and not need a response, that's where the resentment threshold is. If I'm going to feel angry or used or anything above that, I don't do it anymore.
That's so wise, because
I want to be like you.
Well, I think you don't have the same resentment from what it sounds, but if you can contact that feeling, it's useful.
Yeah.
No, I definitely see you as a 2, friend.
Oh, yes.
You could not articulate that experience the way you just did if you weren't a 2. So glad you get to enjoy being a 2. And
well, yes, thank you.
Giving yourself permission to fully be the 2, because what happens in my experience is when someone finally lets in whatever type they are, there's a part of their type that had to be suppressed, and it needs to catch up to the other parts. And so there can be kind of innocent or immature expressions until you get into the swing of it and just realizing you are, or you can be really hard on yourself, but you were always a 2. You were always doing nice things. You now just know it's who you are, so you can relax into it and just watch what happens. And it's going to get better and better, because the awareness of the 2-ness in a new way just has to be integrated. And that's why it gets better and better and better. Like, I really thought I was 2 in the heart type. And when I realized it was 4 and not 2, just opened up my freedom to do things and talk of things that were 4-ish, that an 8 doesn't want to do. But when I say, oh, well, yeah, I might get you something, but what I'm going to do instead is bear witness to your suffering. And that's like the 4. And 2s do that as well, but I would give compassion. I would give my time. And then I realized I have a line of connection to 2, but I don't have 2 in the Tritype. And it was very freeing. And that's what I find with most people. Once you get all 3 types in the Tritype clear, and the instinct, instinct has to be correct. And the stacking of the instincts, because then we have to go after we have to help the 3rd instinct mature, because it's not really blind. That was my mistake saying that. But what I was trying to say years ago was that we're not aware of it. We haven't put conscious time into that, our 3rd instinct. But it matures so quickly once someone knows they're stacking that it just doesn't take much time to bring it up to speed. But the 2nd instinct, it's the arrogance that we think, that doesn't bother me, I'm good with that, is where we really have a hard time letting go. So first we have to work on our primary instinct and discover which one it is. Then we need to help our 3rd instinct mature. And then the really tough part is finding all the ways we have arrogant beliefs around the 2nd instinct. So the ways you would have expectations as was sexual, the way you'd want people to show intimacy towards you, to make it comfortable for you to be intimate and connected. It's not just that it's your 2nd one and it's an auxiliary to your first, which is what I said 25 years ago, and started the whole trend of the third is where we're blind. We're blind in our second one because we don't know how it's influencing both. In that stacking order, it's the one in the middle. So it's impacting and being impacted by the other two. So if we're not aware of what it's up to, it's hard to break down some patterns that we have. It's where we really do need to grow.
So would you say the middle one is where we actually need to focus on being the most comfortable of the three?
We think we're comfortable already, actually. Well, I did add the identifications pretty quickly after the research, because then I started to notice, wait a minute, I was wrong about that. It's not really blind, it's just immature. And the reason it can be hard to get our instinct in the right order is that we can have a positive or negative identification with each one. So if we happen to have a positive identification with the second instinct, we really are oblivious as to how we are either using it for gain in some way, or not tending to something really critical, or disowning a part of the way we interact with others and ourselves in the sense of personal needs. So it's almost like we have to do the identification as well. Then we can really target what can change. And it's amazing when those things start to change. Then we, as twos, that's when you stop expecting and you just enjoy what's there.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a tiny little pinch, or if it's a pinch of sugar or a whole apple pie, it starts to feel okay either way. But that doesn't happen until that second instinct is identified, and if you're positively or negatively identified with it, and the experiences that shaped that identification, because that is nurture. Our identifications are nurture. We're born with our type, but the persona we come up with in our type is nurture. So all of it's important, is what I'm saying. So there you have it.
Wow.
Okay, well, thank you again so very, very much. I think I'm going to really enjoy doing these panels.
Yeah, I learned so much from everybody.
As did I. Just the way people say things just changes forever, the way I see, and I can retrieve it later to help someone else understand why they're a 2 and not a 9, or a 2 and not an 8. Just because you're angry doesn't mean you're an 8. You could just be a sad 2 who doesn't want to feel the pain. It's easier to be angry. Mm-hmm. There's a lot tied into that.
Yeah, wow.
I had to undo some of my declarations from my first research. You gotta forgive me on that. But I've always had the habit of changing as I learn more. I mean, every author feels that way.
Sure.
Their book from 25 years ago is not as good as the book they write now. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just really thank you, panelists, because you have been willing to go to the deeper aspects of 2. And I promise you, it's going to help people type more accurately and understand what's going on with their 2s, or if they are a 2 themselves, they'll know why they're feeling what they're feeling. So thank you very, very, very much. I'm very grateful to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone. Hi, Liz.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.